This episode is sponsored by Little Red's Basket Shop. What's in your basket?
Hello, and welcome back to Defender Resolves First, an unmatched podcast hosted by yours truly, John, known to the Restoration Games community as Tommy Elliott. And with me, as always, is my charming co-host, Michael, known to the Discord as Sidious256. What's going on, Michael?
Oh, not much. We're in Prime tournament season, so we have to have another Prime tournament episode for you.
That's it. Big Mike. Let's tell those folks what we're talking about today.
We're going to talk about the big three. You'll love to see them if they're on your team.
Oh yeah, you love to see them. You hate to love them sometimes. We're talking about the big three, and who are the big three, Mike? Just to fill our listeners in if they don't already know.
Well, I'm going to have to go with Willow, Spike, and Angel. For I know. Good, sad joke, folks. Sad joke. We shouldn't be picking on Buffy as much as we pick on them. But really, we all know them as Bigfoot, Medusa, and of course, Sherlock Holmes.
Absolutely. And so today, Mike and I and some esteemed guests will be breaking down these three fighters, and we'll be sussing out some weaknesses, some strategies. I think we got a good show lined up for you today. What are you thinking, Mike?
I think we have an amazing show. We got some amazing guests. We're going to love to hear from all of them. It's going to make everybody's day hopefully much better to hear our beautiful listening voices. And, well, why don't we start off? What do you got for us about our friend Medusa?
Yeah, let's just jump right into Medusa. Medusa right now in the Winner of Champions tournament. I think we should start with her because she's actually the second most played fighter in the tournament. She's got 70 plays so far. What's interesting about that is so many people are letting her through, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with Sherlock, but the disparity between like the amount of plays Medusa's getting as opposed to the other two is pretty extreme, despite the fact that Medusa has a 69% win rate.
Nice.
Which, yeah, nice. It's pretty phenomenal, honestly. Medusa's big strats are, she's all about discarding your opponent's hand, whether through her defense hiss and slither or through her harpy sidekick cards. She really wants to whittle you down and get you to a point where you don't have defense, so she can play Gaze of Stone, which is her signature card. It's only a 2 attack, but if you win combat with it, you deal 8 damage automatically. And I feel like we've actually seen a couple Gaze of Stones go through this tournament, right, Mike?
I think we've seen more than just a couple. When those wonderful, wonderful Unmatched League games come across in the Unmatched League Discord, and you see the after combats, what happened, a lot of people will say, well, what happened? Well, it just so happened that I got turned to stone. It's just one of those ways. It's a great way to win. It's everybody's known way to close out a game. Or, you do the second shot and just keep whittling them down. It's sometimes just not fun playing against her. So I think we have a good guest to hopefully help us in getting some insight of why they might let us through.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, for our listeners, the little Easter egg Mike just included there. Shout out to our boy Hat Chowder, constantly asking, what happened to every single loser in this tournament? Hat Chowder doing the Lord's work. But moving on, we do have a special guest here to talk about Medusa. We're talking about somebody who has never been Medusa in competitive play, who, even with a spotty track record, just continues to take her on. He's going for the name Perseus. We're talking to Pommedepin.
Cool. Well, now that we've talked a little bit about why Medusa is so effective, we want to talk to the certified Medusa Slayer in the Discord. I know him as Jacob, but you may know him as... Actually, Jacob, how do you pronounce your Discord name? Because I feel like I'm going to butcher it saying it out loud.
Thanks for the insight, John. That's a great question, and there are many answers I'm going to say. I've been called Pommedepin. I've been called Pommedepin. I've been called Pom. I've been called Pomegranate. You could call me Perseus. This name has originated from the French word for pine cone, pomme de pin, apple of pine. But in my Discord name, there's no spaces. So in my mind, it's a brand new word that's just completely made up. So you can pronounce it however you want.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with Palm.
Personally, my favorite is the Mr.
That
Devin.
works too.
I will give Baked Goods credit for the Mr. Depin. The extra M's were not his favorite part, though.
Sounds like something Baked Goods would do. Well, now that we've solved the mystery of your name, which is super fascinating, it's the kind of thing that I'm really excited to do on the podcast when we host our community members, because who'd have thunk it had this big French origin, which is pretty cool. Now that we've got the name origin story, Mr. Palm, or Mr. Deppin, as Baked Goods like to say, what's your unmatched origin story? This is a question we like to ask everybody on the podcast. What got you into Unmatched in the first place?
So my first match set was Cobble and Fog, which I purchased a week before Summer of Legends was announced.
Oh, that's my favorite.
That timing is actually the only reason I am in this community, because purchasing the set, I decided to look up videos for more Unmatched fighters just to see what the other options were. And the video popped up and it's like, ooh, that sounds cool. So I just signed up for the tournament and now we're here.
Wow, so you purchased this set a week before Summer of Legends, and then you top 8 in that same tournament. That's pretty crazy. What was that journey like?
It was a long journey. You want to hear it from the beginning?
Yeah, and you know what? If we're gonna launch into this, I'd love it if you could tell me specifically, since this is the Big 3 episode and you are our resident Medusa Slayer. As somebody who has never banned Medusa in competitive play, you get the game a week earlier, you join the Discord, you see what everybody's talking about, you know about the Big 3, you know Medusa's one of the Big 3, you're a brand new player, and yet you still launch in full first and you just play Medusa. You just let that happen. So yeah, tell me about your competitive journey with Medusa in that first tournament. What did that look like?
Well, her first appearance for me was in round one. I guess appearance is a stretch, but I was the leader, so picking 2/3 of the Big 3, I had Bigfoot and Medusa, and my Medusa got banned. So from that point on, I decided, okay, I have more experience with Bigfoot now since I didn't have experience with either before. So I decided to keep picking Bigfoot going on in the future. Getting into my round 2 match, this is the first time I had the option to ban Medusa because my opponent had picked her. My opponent's picks for that specific matchup in order were Robin Hood, InGen, then Medusa. And since Medusa was the last pick, I thought it was a little weird. It's like, ooh, maybe my opponent doesn't really know how to play Medusa, and picking Robin Hood first should imply that that is their main fighter.
You are like a shark in the water smelling blood right now.
Oh, absolutely. So I had to just ban their Robin Hood. It's like, all right, if that's who they know how to play the best, let's get him out of the water.
Wow.
And I think that shook my opponent for the round. But that's where I started playing against Medusa.
Wow. And then you go on to never ban her.
Yeah, so after that match, realizing what happens when you let someone who doesn't know how to play Medusa use Medusa, I thought, okay, I'm sure a bunch of these people don't know how to play Medusa. So my round 3 match, which you might be a bit familiar with, John.
Yeah, you could say that. PTSD from that match.
Ooh, I had a fun time with Bigfoot in the rafters, but then we had Medusa in Little Red.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. I mean, I did know how to play Medusa, or so I like to flatter myself. So you didn't ban my Medusa, and it was not to your advantage that time.
No. Game 2, you did beat my Little Red with Medusa, which was, I think, the first time I had actually lost with the Little Red. Granted, I hadn't been playing long, but that was something new for me. So I was a bit scared going into our Game 3 Little Red into Raptors.
That was a close match, too, as I recall. I was one card away from winning it. I just totally flubbed positioning and just did not play very smartly. And you, of course, are a very skilled player. Obviously, you went on to the top 8. But man, good times, good memories.
It was great. 3 raptors taken out with a killing blow from 3 larger than life.
Yeah. It's so funny because this past week, I was up against Bug, who is also the Little Red specialist, and I was talking to Zero Skater beforehand, and he said you could always take the Raptors into Little Red, and I said, actually, after my match with Palm last tournament, I will never play the Raptors again. I just still have those terror Vietnam flashbacks of you dropping 3 logs on each of my Raptors as killing blows, and so that's never happening again. So yeah, okay. So you don't ban Medusa. It doesn't work out for you here, and yet you don't pivot. You don't look at this loss and say, okay, maybe I really shouldn't be going up against Medusa. You still continue the streak of not banning her and taking her on.
Yeah, so my round 4 match was against Sojourn, and I had heard that he asked for a big 3 ban against Zero Skater in his match right beforehand. So I'm thinking the reason he's asking for a big 3 ban is because he doesn't like the big 3, because he probably doesn't play them. So even though it didn't work out here, I figured, okay, I'll try it again. Because now I had more reason to actually believe this strategy would work for me.
Sure.
Now, it didn't work, but an argument could be made because I was against Sojourn.
Yeah. What happened in that match? Sojourn happened. Sure.
Yeah. That was my only loss in Swiss, and I got 2-0'd by Sojourn there.
Wow, only loss. Well, yeah, I suppose it would have to be, right? Because then you go on to the top 8. So
Yep.
Keep going. I'm loving the journey so far.
Yeah, so then by that point, I think in the Discord, I talked a lot about how I'm just not going to ban Medusa.
Yeah,
and
you sure did. You're pretty vocal.
I kind of just stuck with it. Going into round 5, I felt this is my brand. I'm not going to tarnish it now. And I decided, okay, I'll play against Medusa and Robin Hood in round 5, which the Robin Hood Little Red game was extremely close. But yeah, again, I didn't beat Medusa here. I played against her. Still absolutely no reason for me to keep this up. And then we get into round 6. This time I was the follower. So up until this point, I was always the leader. Actually, that's not true. Against Sojourn, I was the follower.
Okay.
But besides the Sojourn match, I was the leader. So every round I won, I was the leader. And I picked Sherlock, Bigfoot, Little Red. And they always picked Medusa first, except for when they picked her third. And that's what started the ban journey.
Right.
But yeah, so this time I had picked Medusa, which she got banned from me. And then looking at my opponent's lineup, they had Sherlock, Bigfoot, and Dracula. So I did the common sense thing and just banned Sherlock, which means I've also never banned Bigfoot.
This is a technicality.
If we want to continue with those stats.
That's a technicality.
But I did play Bigfoot twice that match. My loss, because I went 2-1, I lost to Dracula. So I had to beat Bigfoot with both Little Red and InGen.
And you did. And you won the day.
Right.
What?
Yep.
Okay, so then you get top 8, right? 6-week tournament. Then you go straight to the top 8. Any Medusa dealings there?
My feelings for Medusa are I'm going to play against Medusa.
Sure. Did it come up at all?
It absolutely came
It did
up.
come up at least once, because I personally remember something very interesting, that it was during a game where you were Dracula,
I
correct?
was Dracula. Yeah, that was round 3, our game 3 of that round. So if we want to rewind the clock a little bit, I did get to play the Medusa versus Little Red matchup. And for the first time in my Summer of Legends journey, I beat Medusa with Little Red against Baked Goods in Baskerville.
Oh, that's exciting.
It is. He does not think it's as exciting. Anytime I bring up Baskerville and beating the big 3, he gets rather upset at me. So have fun listening to the Palm.
Listen, that is a feeling that I can relate to because my Bigfoot defeat was at Baskerville at your hands.
Was it?
Yeah, it
I
was.
believe you.
You were
I
running.
didn't.
You were running through doors and smashing my raptors.
Oh yeah, it absolutely was.
I have nightmares
Baskerville
about
is just a fun map.
everybody listening now knows Baskerville is the map to ban against you now. Secret strats are out.
Oh. I mean, that's the map that got banned against me most of the time. So I think I was just playing it whenever it didn't get banned because I find it fun. So it
Sure.
was like, cool. Yeah, so I've got my matchup with Baked Goods playing Little Red against Medusa. And that's what sent us into a game 3 because his Sinbad destroyed my Little Red on stream.
Okay.
But it was Medusa against Dracula. And the part that really gave me a name with playing against Medusa is in this matchup. I think it was turn 2, Medusa attacks Dracula, and I decided not to defend the attack. I had a feint in hand, a dash in hand, and maybe another defense in hand, but I decided it's Medusa. You don't need to defend her attacks.
Oh no.
This is where Mike popped into the Twitch chat, actually.
Yeah, I just remember saying something along the lines of, imagine being alpha AF that you don't have to defend against Medusa. Just imagine being that alpha, man.
So how'd that work out for you?
I took a second shot to the face, as what one would do when they just decide to take an undefended attack against Medusa.
Sure.
But then it came down to exhaustion, actually. There was a pretty big turnaround and almost a comeback story in that match.
Almost a comeback story. You know, at the top of the hour, I called you the Medusa Slayer, but more and more it's sounding like that might not be the case.
I mean, I'm on my quest.
Yeah, that's it. So
I'm told my job is to slay Medusa, so I keep on going for it.
So we're heading in now. We're in the Winner of Champions tournament. Week 3 is starting as we're recording this. Still no Medusa bans. How's that working out for you?
Well, I'm currently 2-0 in the tournament at the time of recording, so that means Medusa has yet to ruin my day.
Cool. So talk to me about some of those wins.
You got it. Let's pause.
Okay.
Just because I'm pulling up all that stats, so I can actually talk to you about the game.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay. I got it pulled up. All right. So, game 1 in my Winter of Champions journey, I got my usual lineup as leader: Sherlock, Bigfoot, Little Red, and my opponent picked Medusa, Ingen, and Sun Wukong, which is a new fighter for me to be up against since Battle of Legends Volume 2 was not available in Summer of Legends. And of course, I banned the Ingen just to let Medusa go through, and I thought it'd be fun to slay the monkey. Like, why not add a friend to that list of fighters I want to beat?
Sure.
And I got my Little Red win against Sun Wukong, which meant we weren't going to see Little Red fight Medusa. But I did end up going into a third game with Medusa against Bigfoot, where my Bigfoot came out on top. I nearly lost to Medusa again here. What saved me was recognizing map positioning at the last second. I was standing in a spot where Medusa could have double maneuvered away and I would have lost in exhaustion. Right after I thought I was done with my turn, I'm like, oh, that's the right spot for me to be on. And before my opponent took his final turn, I was like, all right, I needed to move for my second maneuver and just get right here instead of stay in place. And I believe the back spot on the yellow bridge of Sarpedon, with Bigfoot using at least a boost value of 2, you could attack everywhere on the board. and that is what made that difference.
Wow. Okay. Last minute game saving decision.
Yeah, I nearly missed that.
That's the second week in a row on this podcast we've heard about last minute end of the wire game changing thought that saved the game. That's really cool. All right, but then week 2's up. Medusa's back. You're not banning her, so how's that go?
So this time, I usually end up banning InGen,
Mm-hmm.
but I was the follower here, and my opponent got Sherlock, Medusa, and InGen. The reason I ban InGen is not because I don't like fighting them. It is simply because I'm not banning Medusa, and he's usually higher up in order of when they pick him.
Right.
So I banned the Sherlock, and now I'm against Medusa and InGen. Actually, I didn't get to play Medusa. My opponent picked InGen for both games, which was a logical decision. Granted that he won 2 chances with InGen going in for the first game. And then the second game, when he had map choice, it came down to map choice with the weaker fighter makes a lot more sense than giving my little red map choice against Medusa when that's the matchup I have the most experience with.
Right. Well, that's
Definitely went sheer fear of the Medusa Slayer. Why he went InGen twice? It was sheer fear of the Medusa Slayer. Don't let anybody lie to you.
That's it. Your reputation precedes you. It's funny listening to it all, laid out like that as a narrative, because at least in the discussions, in the Discord channels and everything, the idea that you are the big bad Medusa Slayer is very prevalent. And you mentioned this earlier. You said it's my brand, and I think that that's accurate. I think I associate Palm most with playing Little Red, and second most with letting Medusa through. So I want to ask, we hear this narrative. It's kind of a mixed bag. What makes you so confident in this play? Is it really now at this point that you're in a corner and it's your brand and you've got to stick to it, or is there a deeper attitude behind it?
Yeah, so it started off with all right, my opponent might not be familiar with the fighter. Then it became my brand for that very brief period of time. But now I'm at a point where I'm confident letting my opponent play Medusa because I probably know her deck more than my opponent, and I'd rather be up against a fighter whose deck I have memorized rather than a fighter who I'm learning what the cards do as they're revealing them.
Right. What do you make? I want to ask you, and I asked this to Joshua last week. What do you make of the fact that Medusa is seeing so many more plays this season than last in terms of the tournament? Last time she was looking at a similar amount of bans to Sherlock. Wildly different this time. While Medusa and Sherlock have the same roughly amount of picks, Sherlock's ban percentage is through the roof. And last I looked, Medusa was the first or second most played fighter, period, this tournament. A lot of people are letting her through. A lot of people are pulling the Mr. Deppin, if you will, and not banning her. So where do you think this community confidence is coming from? I'd really like to get some insight from you as somebody who pioneered this.
I mean, I'd love to take credit for it, although I doubt their inspiration was watching me play. I think it comes down to Battle of Legends Volume 2 is very new for everyone, and this is the first time seeing them in the tournament. So putting bans more in that direction or in hard counters that they're afraid of might be more prevalent than just banning Big 3 nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I mean, and even the fact Medusa is getting through, and she's not stomping. She doesn't have like an 80 to 100% win rate or anything, but she is winning more often than she's not, right? She's still looking at a roughly 65% win rate, give or take 5%. So when you go up against Medusa, what's your ideal scenario? What would you suggest to the listeners who want to fight Medusa? Because plenty of them are, and the majority of them are losing. So what advice can you give to anybody who wants to take on Medusa in the tournament scene and the release rumbles that we may have in the future or in the ladder?
Something that's really important is taking out the Harpies before they can use Claws That Catch. That card, 3 discards is significant. Just any discard is bad. But getting 3 out of the way where they just can't even use the card is going to be extremely beneficial for you in that fight. Another thing is you want Medusa to be forced into the aggressor position. If you can force Medusa to aggress you, you have to worry less about her special ability where she will ping you for damage every time you come in. You want to be able to hit and run, which is very difficult with a ranged fighter. So I think that brings a lot of positioning experience, which is not something you just get, but something I think a lot of people don't pay attention to when they play. And if you start paying attention to how you're positioned on the board with each maneuver, you can start to work things more into your favor.
Yeah, I can confidently say that positioning has been my downfall many a time in this game. It's something that I'm constantly working on. So I can imagine that that's a relatable thought for many of our listeners. So we know Little Red is your girl. But beyond Little Red, is there anybody that you feel very confident taking in to a battle with Medusa and feeling relatively good about your odds?
I definitely feel confident with Bigfoot as well, which is part of my success in this journey. My 2 most used fighters are Little Red and Bigfoot. And since I know Little Red's deck more than my opponent does, hopefully, I'm comfortable there. But I am also confident in Bigfoot against Medusa because in that rock, paper, scissors triangle of the big 3, Bigfoot is the one who is supposed to be beating Medusa.
Sure.
And I've been forced to fall back onto that at least 3 times, as we've seen.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. In an episode about defeating the big 3, we've got Mr. Deppin advocating using one of the big 3 to do so. You know, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain, or so they say. All right. Mike, do you have anything to add before we let Palm go and enjoy his illustrious evening?
Maybe one last question. Something that gets brought up quite a bit by some folks in the Discord, and I think Zero Skater is a really, really large proponent of this one, is there are games where you see Medusa and it looks very close. It looks like, the health differential is like maybe Medusa's down to 3 health or 5 health. But in reality, it wasn't close. There was no way you were going to get those last 3 health ticks off, if you will. And do you ever feel that way, or maybe you feel it's the opposite? How do you feel going into that? Do you feel like maybe there's like a health disparity of, say, 10? Medusa's at 10, you're at 0, but you're like, man, if I had one more turn, I really think I could have gotten this.
Yeah, that's actually how most of my games have felt. I think all of my Medusa games, besides the game I had won, Medusa was left with double digits for health. But in most of those, I felt very, very close and winnable. I think against Sojourn, in my bottom 7 cards, I had a Once Upon the Time, 3 baskets, What Big Hands, and 2 other cards. I think What Big Mouth You Have. And that's a lot of damage. That's 2 of my best auto damage cards, as well as 3 of my What's in Your Baskets. So, it's obviously, Sojourn's a great player, and I'm not saying that if the card draw was different, I definitely would have beaten him. But it's a game where I had a better chance with better card draw. Now, of course, against him, it's hard to outplay Sojourn just because of how strong he is with his decision making.
Yeah, those after action reports that Sojourn does, I think, really demonstrates the level of analysis and game theory that he's capable of. Well, Jacob, Mr. Deppin, Pommedepin, Pommedepin, a man of many names in search of just one, Perseus. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast and joining us and talking us through your Medusa journey. Do you have anything else to add to our listeners?
I just want to thank you guys for having me, and thank everyone in the community listening to this and keeping our community going because it's a great place to be.
Amen to that. Cool. Thanks so much, man. Well, I'm sure we'll talk to you soon. We'll have you on here again. Moon Knight is coming out, and for anybody listening who does not know, Pommedepin and I are the resident Moon Knight nerds, so we'll definitely have you back on to talk about Moon Knight when that deck is released and when we can dive in.
I am very excited for that day.
You and me both, brother. Thanks so much.
Many thanks to Pommedepin for joining us for that interview. I really like getting the personal history, of our friends and our community players getting into the tournament. Wouldn't you say?
I couldn't agree more. And you know what else I can't agree more on? Is how much of a big competition Bigfoot is. What would you say about that?
Double bigs. We got Big Mike talking Bigfoot in this big competition. We're throwing down triple Bs right now. Yo, I would definitely agree, though. Just looking at some stats for the winner of Champions Tournament, Bigfoot is the 4th most played in the tournament. He is behind Yananga, Medusa, and Little Red. So he's at 68 plays. Little Red's at 69. Nice. So
Nice.
she's just one ahead. And the win rate there is a flat 50. So it's interesting that we're still talking about Bigfoot as a member of the Big Three with that 50% win rate. What do you make of that, Mike?
Well, what I think it comes down to is that he's slowly getting more counters as the game goes on in reality. I think some indirect counters that people obviously know about is Little Red, Muldoon, couple others that could beat him. You always feel like you could be in the game, but he just walks up, he stat checks you, and then he leaves, right? So how do you go against that? Well, now with Sun Wukong out, and all of his stat checks kind of just disappear because it goes to a clone rather than himself, it makes his win rate kind of go down, as well as Yananga being, Yananga. But other than that, 50% win rate, I don't think that's bad considering 68 plays. That's an even 34 and 34. I guess it's more so who you're going against, right? Other than that, yeah, I think it's a great start. What would you say some of the strategy for that guy is all about?
Yeah, the thing with Bigfoot is that Bigfoot, he's got the Jackalope as a sidekick. And the Jackalope, if you can get off all 3 of the Jackalope's schemes, Jackalope horns, that's 6 auto damage right there, which is a significant chunk for any fighter. Bigfoot has more cancels as defenses than anybody else. He has 5 cancel defenses, 3 feints, 2 it's just your imagination. And he has 3 gigantic logs that he just wants to drop on you. 3 attacks with 6 value. They're just flat. There's no effect on them. He's just walking up. Like you said, Mike, he's stat checking you. And I think that this is the perfect moment to talk about Bigfoot as we talk about the meta, because this episode, I think, is very timely. We're talking about the Big Three, and as we've seen with what's coming in the Marvel characters, no spoilers for anybody listening, don't worry, but what we know of the Big Three, I think could be very different in a year's time. And I think that Bigfoot may be on his way out. So no better time than now, I think, to have this discussion.
I couldn't agree more. I think as time goes on, it just makes it so that when more characters come out, they're going to have better matchups. I think stat checkers sometimes, at the beginning, like it is now, they're going to be the ones who are top of the list. As always, he also can keep a great hand advantage with his passive ability. But, as more complex characters come out, and then possibly better stat checkers or people who can take the 4 values and either eat the 4 values or hit into the 4 values, well, they're going to find their way in. And who do you think could talk better than anyone about how to beat Bigfoot, my friend?
Oh, well, that would have to be the hunter himself, Prospero.
I couldn't agree more. Why don't we get a good, quick glimpse into what he thinks if they should all be destroyed?
And with us here today to talk about hunting Bigfoot, you may know him as a legend who has won an official tournament. He manages a board game store. He does not need any intro. He has hunted most things that have hunted you. Prospero. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, we are here to talk about our wonderful Bigfoot segment, as We all know he is a stat checker who just walks up to you, hits you with a log, walks away, and see what you can do about it, right? That's his whole thing. So you are pretty synonymous within the Discord for being the man to take him down with the great InGen characters. We all know you main him. We all know he's at a 17% win rate, but nobody strikes fear into the hearts of men like you with the InGen. So how about this? How about we start off by asking, what is your unmatched origin story?
Yeah, well, my Unmatched origin story goes back pretty much to the beginning of Unmatched publicly. I work with restoration games at conventions, and I was at, I want to say PAX Unplugged. It was either PAX Unplugged or Gen Con. And it was 2 or 3 years ago. And they tell us that they have a new line of games. What they'll do is, like, a month beforehand, they'll send us the instructions for all the new games that they'll be demoing so that we can learn them and have more information. So that way when we're there, we're ready to go and we can demo the games for people. And they were under the impression that Unmatched would be kind of a hot commodity, mainly because they had a limited supply. And so so that was my introduction to it, was at the convention. I hadn't really heard of it before that. This is actually the one restoration game I played the original. I did play the original Star Wars Epic Duels. Not a ton, but I had some information about how that worked.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah, I remember enjoying the original Star Wars Epic Duels. But when Unmatched came along, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And Justin himself taught me how to play. It was, I think, the evening before the con actually opened. And then the con opened, and we had a line every day. We had it broken up into 3 or 4 days supply, depending on which con it was, because I cannot remember. And every day we would sell out of our day supply in 15 minutes.
Wow.
And so then we would just have to tell people the rest of it, well, there'll be more available tomorrow. Get here early. And Mondo was in a similar situation because they also were selling Unmatched stuff, and they also would just fly through their supply. And I was astonished. I was absolutely dumbfounded at this response. Like, I had seen Fireball Island and like Downforce expansions and those kind of things launch. Never this sort of like energetic excitement for a product. So I knew it was special. After the convention, most of the time they let us take a certain amount of restoration games home as part of our pay for working and selling. And because I had demoed Unmatched some, and because I really enjoyed it, they let me take home the demo copies from the convention that they had sleeved and had been used at the convention. So that's how I got Battle of Legends 1, Robin Hood vs. Bigfoot, and Bruce Lee. And that was the start of it. And I really enjoyed it. I signed up for playtesting as soon as it happened. As soon as that stuff started, I was picking up sets basically as they came out. But I think it wasn't really until everybody got this competitive bug, and Zero and all the TOs started organizing a competitive scene that I really realized like how much I enjoyed this game, how focused it could be. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started with Unmatched. I've been here basically since the beginning and riding this train. I now know about as much about characters that aren't out as I do about characters that are, but yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Wow, that's really cool. You've been there genuinely since the beginning. Do you think in the beginning where you were having those long lines, was that demand from the connection to Star Wars Epic Duels, or was that from just like the marketing materials? Like, what do you think was driving that craze before the game was even out?
Well, with restoration games, it's basically all about the nostalgia. It's about the bringing back stuff that people know, and like obviously that sales system has worked out very well. And frankly, I think it's created great games because, as I've mentioned before, this was the first restoration game that I played the original. But I was selling Fireball
Right.
Island. I love Downforce. Um, Dinosaur Tea Party is great. Like I can just continually name great games that they make that I really enjoy, having never played the original. So they're making good games, but the fact that it's also got that connection is really big. So I believe there had been some marketing beforehand, maybe a couple of reviews, that the system was good, that the game, that people found the gameplay really fun. And so I think that, on top of the fact that it was limited supply, really
Sure.
just drove it. I was very happy at the next convention that we had much more stock and I could sell it to everyone who wanted one.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. So thanks for joining us today, Prospero. We're talking about the big three, and we've got you on because I think the community really looks to you as the man who hunts Bigfoot, especially after that very first tournament we had where you won and you had that huge like Bigfoot win. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little about your history taking down Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, if you were hearing about the big three, I thought you'd be talking about Sherlock. I only play Sherlock now. No, I'm kidding. That is not my choice most of the time. But as far as my history taking down Bigfoot, so at the first tournament, the meta wasn't really like, it had been theorized for some time what the meta is, who's strongest, and that sort of thing. This was right after the release of Little Red and Beowulf, so they weren't as played. Just a little bit. Like obviously, Bug, my great opponent, who I've played many times. He is well known for Little Red, but at that point there wasn't a ton of play there. But the big three had already been theorized. But the rankings were a little different. Most people put Bigfoot first, then Medusa, then Sherlock. And like this, I don't think the strength of a good Sherlock, someone who knows what they're doing with him, had really been discovered at that point. And Medusa was consistent, but Bigfoot was seen as the ease of play, the barrier to entry was great. So Bigfoot was first pick. And so I'm a big fan of professional esports, particularly professional League of Legends. And the kind of dance you do with pick ban in professional League of Legends is most of the time you ban the strongest picks until they get nerfed. But sometimes a team who thinks they're tricky will leave it up. And because they think they've got a plan, a way to beat it. And so I decided I'd be tricky. And I knew Bigfoot would be big going into it. And so I looked around for potential counters. I didn't own the Jurassic Park set at the time. But I played one or two trial runs on Tabletop Simulator. And I loved Muldoon. I love how he plays. He's all about positioning. He's all about playing the map. And I know that Bigfoot's strengths, though many, some of the biggest strengths is movement, the ability to get wherever he needs to go, including moving through enemies, and hitting you in the face really hard. So I could take away one of those strengths, the movement, with the traps, if you position them well on the map. Also, a lot of people with Bigfoot draw cards using their passive to keep their hand size up. If they are doing that, then that essentially balances Muldoon's card draw from his traps. So Muldoon can keep a fairly large hand size, and he's not as much at risk for exhaustion. And so that was my theory, and the couple of tests I ran went well. And so I started pulling him out in the tournament. I think I played him at least 3 or 4 times, leading up all the way up to, I think the winners bracket final against Bug was I think the last time in that tournament I used him. And I beat his Little Red on Marmorial, but then I think I lost the next 2. Which put me to the losers bracket final, where I played another 3 games, and then the grand final. But in the grand final, I didn't pick Muldoon because I figured by then someone had some idea how to counter. So I picked Bug's Little Red, so neither of us got our main characters. But yeah, that's kind of my that was kind of my history. I was kind of I don't want to say I was necessarily the first to beat Bigfoot, but I was the one who had the idea to let someone pick Bigfoot, let them pick Bigfoot first, because I was going to ban their second or third pick because I had an answer for Bigfoot.
Yeah, and then you became the Muldoon guy. That's it.
I did.
I think not only the Muldoon guy, but I mean, you literally have a move named after you. Like, everybody knows it. It's called the Prospero. You call for backup, you drop some traps around somebody, and then they should all be destroyed, right? You try to get it for the 7. I mean, that's got to feel kind of great, right? Like having a name named after you.
It can be difficult to pull off. I think in tournament, I only pulled it off once against Bug Hunter's Little Red. Not Little Red. It was actually the Huntsman that I did it, because it's a lot easier to do against the Huntsman. And you need a lot of setup to do it, and you need the right map to do it. It's a very specific move, definitely not as open as like the Red Death or the Thing.
Right.
But it is a move.
Well, the fact that it's a little more niche, a little harder to pull off, I think that's why it's better that it's named after you. I think that makes it, more unique. So what advice do you have for anybody listening on how to take down the big guy, Mr. Bigfoot? I have noticed this tournament that a lot of folks seem pretty comfortable heading in to fight him. I think the meta has shifted a little bit. That's largely thanks to what you did in that first tournament. Just that's a natural evolution, I think. Somebody like you win the tournament and you create this environment where taking Bigfoot down is not this impossible task. And now we're at where we are now. That's it's a slope that we've done. So I'd love if you could, tell anybody listening just some advice you have on bringing him down.
Yeah. So I think that particularly really good players like Zero, know that I believe that the Bigfoot Muldoon matchup is actually more of a skill matchup. It's not a counter. I would not call it a counter. I wouldn't say that if you've never picked up Muldoon before and your opponent has never picked up Bigfoot before, I don't necessarily think that that you're going to just have an advantage by default. One of the other advantages that I had at that point was that Bigfoot was being banned so much that people weren't playing him. And so when Bigfoot goes in, when they went in and they're playing Bigfoot, they are not playing him optimally against me, who have prepared for the Bigfoot. So that in that way, I had an advantage. I don't necessarily think that I will have that advantage always. I have been a lot more hesitant to pick Muldoon in this tournament, not only because people know that I'm known for it, but also because I think it requires a lot more finesse, and map pick is very important for Muldoon because he almost plays the map more than he plays the opponent. But with those caveats out of the way, we can talk about taking down Bigfoot and what it is. So when you talk about Bigfoot's strengths, obviously he has a lot of them. He has good card draw. He has 6 auto damage through jackalope horns. He's got really big numbers on his attack cards. And a good amount of versatiles too. And the jackalope only has, I think, those 3 cards, if I'm not mistaken. The 3 jackalope horns are the only jackalope specific cards.
Yeah, the jackalope can use any of his canceled defenses too,
Right.
which is pretty significant.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the good things about Muldoon is he's not going to get completely screwed up by cancels the same way that Sinbad or Red or like Bruce Lee will. So the feints are annoying, but that's all they are. So first of all, with Muldoon, you also have to, whenever you're taking into account these things, you always have to figure out, okay, what are my strengths and weaknesses? What are my opponent's strengths and weaknesses? Zero likes to talk about the win condition. You got to kill him. And you have to figure out what you need in order to do that, and what you need to not die before you do. And so against Bigfoot, it's really a matter of don't let him touch you, because Muldoon has some good defenses. He has 5 copies of 4 strength defenses, 3 leapaways, and 2. I've hunted most things that have hunted you. For a forward value defense is a good defense. It if you block a log with that, you take 2 damage. Which, if you block every log with that, that's only 6. And Muldoon...
Yeah, you're really mitigating a big chunk of what he's doing.
Yeah, so if he does 6 that way, and 6 with jackalope horns, he still has to find a damage or 2. That's not enough. Which, against most characters, like, you hit them with all 3 logs, even if they're blocking, they're hurting. Pretty significantly. If not completely taken out. But the trick, of course, being is that he has a lot more attacks than that. Bigfoot does. So, you have to make it so he only hits you 5 times in the game. And the way you do that is by positioning your traps and workers in a way that he can't reach you, but you can reach him. That's kind of the big thing. So So that's the first thing, that's more of a Muldoon hint than a Bigfoot hint, is don't let him hit you. He can't log you if he can't hit you. And every log that he has to waste whacking through a worker, that's free money, because workers
it's free real estate.
Workers are the freest resource in Unmatched. Like Dracula's sisters, he's got 3 of them. He can bring 2 back during the game. That's 5 sisters. Robin Hood has 4 outlaws. He can bring 2 back during the course of the game. That's 6 outlaws. Muldoon, if you play it right, gets 9 workers. That's 9 attacks that that he could be spending on Muldoon himself, but has to spend to take out the workers to get through them. That's crazy. 9 cards in a third, that's almost a third of your deck. Just to take out sidekicks. And every damage that's over the one that they need is completely wasted damage. So keep him away from your hero is, rule number 1. Rule number 2 is actually kind of a general rule for taking out Bigfoot. The jackalope should die, and the jackalope should die quickly. This can be difficult to do because, obviously, the jackalope can play a lot of Bigfoot's defenses. The plus side, though, is every defense that they burn protecting the jackalope is not a defense they can use for Bigfoot.
It's a math game
Right.
now.
But you want to take out jackalope as quickly as possible, both because, like if you're playing Muldoon, for example, the jackalope, after they've gotten the 6 value out of all the jackalope horns, they can just tank traps the whole time and just burn through their health like that. And if you're trying to decide between Bigfoot taking a hit, which he can't heal, and is your objective of the game, taking 1 damage, and the jackalope taking 1 damage, you obviously want Bigfoot to take it. So the faster you kill jackalope, the more traps Bigfoot has to tank. But obviously, the other thing is jackalope horns, there's 3 copies. And so ideally, in an ideal shuffle, they will be, 1 towards the beginning, 1 towards the middle, 1 towards the end. If you take out the jackalope towards the beginning of the game, they will only get 2 auto damage, which means they have that much more damage they have to find with Bigfoot, which you will then be kiting using traps and workers. So taking out jackalope early is just good for any fighter. The thing you have to realize, though, is you have to be able to pivot if the cards don't come up in your favor or if they defend them very well. And jackalope gets at least 2 off, then you probably want to pivot to attacking Bigfoot himself, because you don't want to waste too much damage and too much time killing jackalope. And jackalope isn't going to be the one hitting you for 6.
Right.
So even if he uses jackalope to come up and attack you, I'm pretty sure the worst it can do is like a momentous shift for 5.
Mm-hmm.
Which then brings up probably my final advice for taking down Bigfoot, and that's keep on him. If Bigfoot is on the offensive, he has better numbers than you. I don't care who you're playing as. The numbers just are better. It's just how it works. But one of Muldoon's strengths, and I was actually just watching Baked Goods strategy video about consistency. One of Muldoon's strengths is a lot of consistency, like high numbers of cards, of specific copies of cards, if that makes sense. Like, he has 4 copies of Rending Shot. He has 3 copies of Tactical Advance. He has 3 copies of They Should All Be Destroyed. Lots of consistency particularly with attacks. And so the more you attack Bigfoot, the more he'll be forced to defend with hybrids. The more he's forced to defend with hybrids, the less cards he has to attack you with. So for Muldoon, I like to try and keep up the pressure as much as possible. Anytime that I can defend with a tactical advance that allows me to move my workers into a position where I can get a double attack off on a round, is a good. It's good because particularly since when I'm attacking, I'm controlling. So a lot of people will hold on to their feints and their regroups to defend because they're worried because Bigfoot's going to come and attack them. But a regroup ain't going to do squat against a log.
It's 4 damage to the face.
Right. So 5 damage on a log is just at 4 or 5 damage. You might as well take the whole log. Where if you're attacking with feints, now you're negating some of their movement ability. Now you are, and with regroups, you're pulling out defense cards because it could be they could all be destroyed. So they pretty much have to block, and if they don't, it's free damage. Which it's a war of attrition. It's little plinks. You're not going to be hitting him for big unless you pull my move, and it's even harder to pull my move against Bigfoot. than against other characters.
Right, because he'll just cancel the effect.
Right.
Yeah.
But using rendings, using ambushes, and then not boosting them, or boosting them. If they don't block, you boost it. If they do block, well, they just burned a card for a 2-value attack. Or if you're getting really spicy and they're not attacking your sidekicks at all and they're just not dying, you can boost with Call for Backup.
That's real spicy.
Yes, it's not often that you do that because they will feel like they have to get through your sidekicks, which is what you want. But Call for Backup is one of the most expendable boost value 3 cards that you have. The second shot on Muldoon is just not as good as Medusa's. It makes me sad. It hurts me right here.
You hate to see it.
Not only is it only a 2 instead of a 3, but you just don't have the value that she has. Come on, Restoration. What are you doing here?
It's
what
okay.
Are you doing here?
Because Muldoon will be better into Black Panther than Medusa will. But, no spoilers.
Oh, Defender resolves first. Exclusive tease from Prospero. You love to see it. Well, Prospero, I think that was all really great advice. We got a 3-step plan. We got some good info on mathing out your win condition, some good stuff on positioning. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add or ask Prospero while we have him here on the podcast?
No. I think that everybody was in for a treat with that. I think everybody knows to ban against his Muldoon, even at the 17% win rate. I myself use Muldoon quite a bit, usually. I'm a believer. I'm a believer in what you said the most, which is the map is just... That's his thing, is if he can do the map portion of it and win the map position, then you'll be doing okay. But other than that, I just wanted to thank him for being here, and I seen all your matches so far. I don't mean to bring up old memories, but you're doing much better than the last tournament. I think we're seeing you back in full stride here. Possibly a run for the end of it all, and maybe we'll see you in some finals.
That
again.
would be fun. I am feeling a lot better in this tournament. The last tournament was happening just as I was starting this new job, running the game store, and so I was very focused on that. I really only joined the last tournament because I felt I needed to defend my title, and I hadn't prepped any.
The weight of expectation.
Yeah, I didn't do any prep or anything, and people had prepped against me. They knew how to beat the Muldoon going in, and so I just dropped a bunch of games early and then dropped out. But I am feeling a lot more confident now. I did just beat Bug yesterday, which in a very spicy game.
Yeah, it was last night.
I should not have, but that
I was talking about that comeback with Little Red for probably hours, and I rewatched it 6 times how you pulled that off, and I'm still stunned on how that Little Red game ended.
It should not.
And Yanangon.
Yeah, I think about that, and I'm like, no, I should not have won that. That was a gimme. That was a steal. Bug got that stolen away.
Better to be lucky, right?
It's
you preach
true.
It. You preach it, and it works.
Well, it's like Elliot said on the podcast last episode. Sometimes the wins are souffles, sometimes they're casseroles, and I think that going for broke win right there, you could categorize it either way. It was fun to watch, at least.
I give the people what they want.
It really was.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I think you definitely gave the people what they wanted on the podcast today. Thanks so much for swinging by, Prospero.
Yeah, look forward to listening in.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll have you on.
Hopefully we'll have you on again. Yeah, hopefully we can get you on again sometime.
Cool. Thanks.
See you around.
Wow. Wow. That was some detailed strategy advice from Prospero. We want to thank him again for coming on to Defender Results First. Thanks for chatting with Mike and I and giving our listeners such a detailed strategy for Muldoon into Bigfoot. Gave us a 3-step process, mathed it all out for us and everything. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't agree more. Now let's get into the most heated one of the big three, if you will. The most detective of detectives. The Sherlock Holmes. What do you got on us?
Well, it's elementary, my dear Watson. Sherlock Holmes. We're looking at, let's just look at his winner of champions stats, okay? He's got only 35 plays. We'll talk about that in a second. But with those 35 plays, he's got a 69% win rate.
Nice.
So Sherlock has the highest ban percentage in the tournament at 75%. So yeah, Sherlock only has 35 plays, but Sherlock has been picked over 100 times. He's the highest ban percentage by a considerable amount, actually. Medusa is the second highest at 50%. So people are letting Medusa through half the time. Bigfoot's getting through about a third of the time. So there are people who are confident taking these players on. Sherlock, though, no, 3/4 of the time, our friends, our community members are saying, not a chance.
Now, why is that, John? What makes you think that he is so strong that you just can't let him through? His values aren't that great. He's not a stat checker. What makes him so great?
Yeah, so Sherlock's whole strategy involves royally screwing up your opponent's day. Let's put it that way.
Well, it sure is.
Yeah, you've got scheme damage. You've got learning your opponent's hand. You've got the double maneuver strategy.
Bam!
You've got healing.
Bim!
You've got Watson, the gun, a 5-value flat attack for no reason. And then
he's got the Glock.
He's got the Glock. Watson's coming in, saving the day. And then you've got passes on passes on passes on passes. It's just...
Of course.
And we didn't even talk about counterpunch, but who wants to talk about counterpunch? Honestly, it's
so hard because you can't. What also makes it tough, you can't feint him, right? So if you're adjacent, counterpunch is going to get off no matter what you do against it. I mean, you really have to leap away. You have to, and it has to be on him offensively counterpunching for your leap away to even work. There's just not much you can really do against a lot of his cards. It's really tough.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I didn't even mention, you can't feint his cards. That's his whole thing. You can't cancel him. His cards are Watson cards. You can't cancel any, but there's so few in the deck. It's almost not worth it.
It's not.
Yeah, so we've had some great experts come on to talk about handling Medusa and Bigfoot. And so here today to talk to us about how to take down Sherlock is nobody, actually. There's nobody here. There's nobody coming. Nobody's going to give you any strategy guides. We have not lined up a single person. We asked, folks. We asked. There's just nobody out there. So our advice is just ban him.
Ban hammer.
Just
end it.
Just drop that ban hammer, folks. Look, we're looking at a 75% ban rate. What are we doing? What is going on? Those are rookie numbers. We got to get those numbers way up. That's going to be a 90%, folks. What are you doing out there? Why are you taking this guy on?
Jesus. I love to see when he gets through and somebody beats him, but it's so rare. And honestly, the times that he loses, I don't mean this any indirect way. I'm not trying to call anybody out who plays him and loses with him. I've lost with him plenty of times. But it's usually people who are not as experienced playing him, and compared to the people who are. The people who play this man optimally, this wonderful character, Sherlock Holmes, is dang near undefeatable. There's not much you can do. The best way to beat him, in my opinion, is you take Raptors, you go on Herot, you go first, and you absolutely blitz him. The problem with that is if you don't get your cards in the right order even, you just get mauled anyway because his confirmed suspicion hurts all the Raptors. And if he pulls your Eviscerate, everybody takes all that damage. it's really tough. I mean, what strategy do you know of, John?
Yeah, that Raptors thing is really high risk, high reward, and you make a really interesting point too when you talk about like the losses that we've seen are with people who maybe don't have the best handle on Sherlock, or just picking Sherlock because he's a member of the Big Three and they've never played him before. Because you have to imagine that wandering caretaker is never losing with Sherlock in a tournament scene, even though nobody lets him play his Sherlock. He's very vocal about it. So to answer your question, though, Mike, as far as my own strategy goes, I really wanted to have something cool for the podcast. I really wanted to have like a Defender Resolves first exclusive. And so we ran a couple of matchups last week, you and I, where I was King Arthur into your Sherlock on Hanging Gardens. I kind of thought, I was game crafting, theory crafting, and I was like, this is going to be huge, and it's going to be great if I could just drop this on the podcast and just be like, guys, listen, take Arthur into Sherlock. Unfortunately, not really the slam dunk I wanted it to be. We did it a few times, and you won a few times. I won once. So I would say there's opportunity, but, I mean, I won not because I played super well, but you made that one
I made a critical mistake. You never know how it goes if I didn't make the critical mistake. But I think there was just too much of an opportunity where there was one game we played. It was almost like a manhandle. It was like nothing could get done for you. And that's how it feels sometimes. It feels like everything you want to do, Sherlock just takes and makes you go cry in the corner. And it does. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've done Dracula, Sherlock against Dracula. Oh, I think he probably has beast form in his hand. Well, let me take a peek. Oh, he does. But I'm not going to take the beast form. I'm going to make him get hurt by the beast form by doing the combo, which, as everybody may know, you're going to eliminate straight into confirmed suspicion for your 2 actions. You get 2 passes. You take a card away from them, and then you call out another card for them to get rid of. You basically, for the cost of your 2 cards, your 2 passes, you take 2 of their cards. It's quite annoying, to be honest. So if you don't have a character who can multi-action, drop his hand count low, and keep at him, it's going to hurt. And, when you hear that, you think Bruce Lee. You want to think that Bruce Lee does well into him, right? Because he can keep his hand count low by keep gaining actions. He technically has 5 feints. And with Bruce Lee, elementary is just so easy. Oh, you have a 3 right now. Yeah, it's 3.
3. That's true.
Even if you don't guess, if he has 1 card left, it's a 2. Like, it's not that hard. Like, I mean, it's just stuff like that. So that's why I think Raptors do somewhat well, is they can surround him, they can pin him, and then they can just wall up on him constantly. And they don't care about having a low hand count. They don't care about their hand being empty a lot of the times because they just do so much damage output. Yeah, it's just one of their things. I mean, I saw a game recently with B Cyclone and the Raptors. I commented, he probably doesn't have defense right now. After the game, he messaged me. He's like, I didn't have defense. I was just going for it. And I was like, yeah, that's just how Raptors play. And that does well into Sherlock. Reckless.
Very volatile, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Just to put it out to the community, if that idea of Arthur on Hanging Gardens is rolling around in your mind, just gather the storms, pin Sherlock on the bottom of the board so that you have the high ground. Sherlock can't go anywhere. You've got Merlin on the other side. I think that there's some potential there, and maybe if I worked on that more, I could exploit it. I don't know. But I put it out to you guys. Most of you guys are better players and strategists than I am. So see if you can do something with it. Twister Strudel, Mr. King Arthur champ, if you're listening, do something with it. I believe in you.
Figure it out for us, man. We want to hear it.
Yeah,
we
seriously.
do.
So, Mike, I think that brings us to the really cool thing.
I think it is the best thing we could have asked for. As everybody knows, Restoration Games really goes out of their way for this Discord community. And if you don't know, I think you need to start realizing it, because I don't think there's a company out there who supports a social media much more than them.
If you don't know, you better ask somebody.
And I've been very vocal. They've even helped with our logo for the wonderful podcast we have here. And when I personally asked us, hey, is it cool if we make a podcast? And he was for it. He loved the idea. And then he told me once, he said, if you ever need somebody, just ask and we'll see what we can do. And I tell you what, John, I did. And why don't you tell us who we got here today?
Yeah, so pretty exciting. We were really excited to sit down and talk to Brian, game designer with Restoration Games. You know him from the Discord. Brian is and Noah and Justin and Rob and the whole team. They're all involved in the designing of the decks. Brian is probably one of the most vocal members of the team in the Discord, so you've probably seen him around. I know that he and Noah have both been really excited and really vocal about the Marvel set. So we got Brian to come on, guys, and talk about the big three, how that influences what Restoration Games is doing for design, what Restoration Games thinks about the big three. It's a great time. Let's just get right into it. I mean, this is such a treat. All right, well, we get to welcome to the show today Brian from Restoration Games. This is a great treat for us. I know it's going to be a huge treat for our listeners. Brian, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I love being on podcasts.
Yeah, this is so cool. And to have you on our second episode about the big three, we really want to pick your brain today about what you guys think about the big three, if that's cool. Well, great. Yeah, sure. I want to start by asking, how do you feel about having a big three?
So I think that this is sort of an interesting subject whenever we talk about it, because like we do talk about sort of the big three in our design meetings, right? And it was such an organic thing that came out of the sort of competitive scene. Like, we didn't design Medusa, Sherlock, and Bigfoot to be like the strongest characters. We like designed them all to be relatively balanced. And I mean, for reference, Bigfoot and Medusa were from before I came on as a designer. So that was sort of Restoration's first shot at, like, what should characters feel like? What is balance like? And so like, we sort of expected, I think, a little bit of, well, there's going to be some overpowered characters and underpowered characters. Cause I think that happens in any competitive game, but Sherlock, I think, was really interesting because the community plays this game so much differently than we do internally. And we released Sherlock before there was this sort of big competitive scene, right? So like, we were sitting there, in the putting the finishing touches on Cobble and Fog, and we were like, oh man, are we sure that Dracula's not going to be really overpowered? Are we sure that Jekyll and Hyde need these things? And like, we were having all of these minute discussions, and we were like, yep, Sherlock's done. Absolutely good. He's perfectly balanced and all of this other stuff. And then we released him, and the community just was wild with him,
menacingly.
Right? Yeah, just like in the back of the box. So, it's really interesting because having the competitive community has sort of taught us a lot of lessons about how people play this game at a high level and how people are sort of receiving these characters. So, for me, I think having a big three is sort of a boon to us as designers, right? Because it's sort of the thing that we can put our flagpole on to say like, oh, how powerful are these characters? Well, how do they play against, Bigfoot, Medusa, and Sherlock? And that gives us a really good gauge on, like whether or not these characters are going to feel good and feel powerful, especially in high level.
Kind of want to offshoot off that because you brought up something interesting. How do you guys internally balance when you're talking about new fighters and stuff, the competitive side of the community, which I have to imagine is a minority in terms of like your sales potential? Like, how do you balance developing these fighters knowing there's a sect of your sales potential that is super competitive, but then larger than that, there's a lot of people who are going to pick this game up, buy it, play it 3 to 5 times, stick it in their closet, and never look at it again?
Sure. Like, I think that this is a really fun sort of ethos that we get whenever we get to design Unmatched, right? Unmatched is I think a lot of people make comparisons to things like, Warhammer or Magic the Gathering or things like that when they talk about the way that we go around and balancing these sets, right? There's a little bit of a misconception there because we get the benefit of having a completely playable experience in one box, right? We're not expecting the average consumer to, buy hundreds of dollars worth of product and then like spend time building decks or building armies or whatever, right? So we sort of get this cool thing where we get to say, for people who are more casual, for people who don't want to sort of jump into the deep end, as it were, of like the competitive and join the Discord and be in tournaments and things like that. For the people that don't want to do that, we have to assume that they're going to buy like this box and maybe one other one. And so realistically, our job is relatively easy, right? Because we just have to make sure that the box is balanced. We have to make sure that all 4 of the characters are a fun matchup and that, you know, players are going to have a good time putting these characters together. And then we can spend much more time on sort of the competitive experience where we say, like, you know, how does this person compare against Sherlock or Medusa? How do they compare against Invisible Man and all of this other stuff? And for Mike, who's been a part of our playtests, you know, we run our playtests in a bunch of different waves. Where the first wave, when we don't have any data and we don't know what's going on, we just sort of say play against whoever because we don't know how balanced these are. And so we just sort of toss it to the community and we say, like, please tell us if there's anything that's horribly wrong. And we get some good data on that. And then we run as many playtests as we need to make sure the box is balanced within itself. Usually that's pretty easy. But sometimes, you know, especially with like the Marvel sets, we had some trouble with it. And, you know, then we do one final playtest of, hey, play against whoever you like. We usually try and select for people who are super involved in the community. We call them our power users. And like our last playtest that we run, we are just like, go nuts. We've balanced these guys. We think that they're ready. We're going to do some small tweaks after this, but like by and large, we know the form that they're going to take. And that helps us really home in on like the sort of competitive numbers, right? Like, should this be a 6 or a 7? What should this boost value be? How much damage should this thing do? That sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think to jump on that, Battle Legends Volume 2, pristine. Balanced within itself really well. And then how it does against the rest of the decks that are out, fantastic. I have to say so myself. I think
great.
Phenomenal job. Best set.
Yeah,
personally,
super appreciate that.
I think I'm not the only one in saying that. I hope I'm not the only one. I don't know what the listeners think. We'd love to hear what you have to say about that. You guys knocked it out of the park. It was long awaited, and it was worth every minute.
Yeah, and it's cool because you're seeing how it's shaking up the meta right now in the Winter of Champions tournament. I know that question didn't really relate to the big 3, but I couldn't resist because you're here. And yeah, cool. Well, do you even agree, like internally, do you guys agree with the big 3, with the meta around them? Or do you feel like we're missing something, or that there's somebody else maybe that we need to be focusing on? Like, how do you guys even feel about the chosen 3?
So this is sort of an interesting question, right? Because like whenever we talk about metas and like big 3 and chosen characters and high tier and low tier, right? That's all like that stuff is all community defined, right? So that meta definitely exists because that's the way that people who are playing tournaments play. Do I think that like those are the 3 strongest characters in the game? Like, nah, my girl Little Red is up there, and like I can like I feel like I can take all comers with Little Red. You know, but John's sort of shown me up on stream a couple of times.
As is tradition.
As is tradition, right? If he's gonna smack down Justin, I gotta go in and take my lumps too. But no, I think that it's interesting, especially because we see so far into the future, right? Like we're working on sets right now that aren't going to come out until 2024. And so having that data is really interesting to us because frankly, y'all play this game way more than we do, you know, and like there's no way that we're ever going to beat out the competitive experience of like 50 unmatched fans in a room, right? So, you know, we do lean on that stuff a lot, and we do think that like, you know, whether or not it's perceived value or like real value, that value is there and that value exists, right, competitively. And so we do have to take that into account because we are paying attention to the audience. We're listening to you guys whenever, you know, we talk about it. I usually pop into the community tournaments channel every, you know, at least once a day just to sort of catch up on stuff. And so, you know, it's that those things existing and shaping the tournament scene are super, super interesting. And sort of like you said, Battle of Legends Volume 2 is shaping up that meta now as we speak during the Winter of Legends tournament. You know, because like we're finding out that like Yanenga plays really well into Bigfoot. And so it's really interesting to see like, oh, that's how this is breaking down. And that's how sort of we're going to see this meta change and evolve over the course of the next 6 to 12 months And I think even more so when the Marvel characters come out, right? Like I think that there are a lot of Marvel characters that sort of interact with those big three characters in a way that is really, really interesting. And so we sort of hope to see it there, that, you know, we hope to see it that the Marvel characters change the way that people are doing pick bans and things like that, where, you know, they can say like, oh, someone else has picked Sherlock, and Sherlock is much more of a 50-50 matchup against these characters. So, you know, I'll jump in on them, you know, and that's sort of the goal that we sort of start out with whenever we start designing a character, and whenever we start doing that sort of fine-tuning balance, is like, how is this going to match up against the people that are really strong? How is this going to match up against the people that are really weak? How do we create fair matchups?
Cool. Yeah, that leads right into what I wanted to ask you, which is, how does having this community perceived big three influence the development of new fighters? So, for example, with these Marvel characters or anybody you're working on now, are you looking and saying, you know, this is our power cap, and we don't want to go above it? Or are you saying, no, that's not necessarily the case? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, you know, Rob is always sort of the angel on the shoulder whenever we're having our design meetings, because we always, you know, like Noah and I are consummate Magic players. We've been playing Magic for like 25 years, right? And so Magic has a huge like power creep problem, where like every set that comes out is just more powerful than the last one, and then eventually they go off of a cliff and you get a set that is like absolutely low power, and then they sort of do that cycle over and over again. And they've been doing it for like a decade. And so Rob and Justin specifically aren't in that mindset, and they haven't been for their entire design careers. And so it's like, it's really valuable to have different types of designers in the room, because Rob gets to sort of, whenever we have these really wacky, powerful ideas, he sort of gets to like sit us down and say like, hey, we don't want to make sure we want to make sure that somebody who loves playing Sherlock or loves playing Bigfoot doesn't look at this set and go like, well, I can't play my favorite character anymore, right? So we want to make sure there's always a reason to do those picks. And like, you know, like anything else, sometimes we're successful and sometimes we aren't. But it's really important to us to make sure that like people get attached to these characters, right? People have their favorites, and we want to make sure that they have a reason to play their favorites, right? And so we sort of come at it from two angles. I think the big three is a big one, right? Where we want to make sure that like, even if we have someone who is, you know, good against Medusa, that we specifically designed to be good against Medusa, we want to make sure that like that match is still pretty close to 50-50, right? Like 60-40 is okay, and you know, it's statistics, and so none of these numbers are really solid, but like that's sort of what we're aiming for, right? So that even if you're like, man, I want to stun on this person, I'm going to play like Medusa into Luke Cage, right? That like you still get that sort of feeling because Medusa is your favorite, and you win that matchup because you know Medusa better than anybody else, and that's a point of pride for you, and that's great, you know. And we want to make sure it's that way for most of the characters, right? And I think like, you know, some people have pointed out to like the Buffy set, where it's like competitively, you know, you have like Angel and Spike and Willow who don't do super well and who are much more difficult to sort of play into those matchups. And you know, that's us having a bunch of different design goals, right? Buffy is, you know, very good in 2v2 and does a lot of interesting interactions and things like that. And I think some of the fallout of that is, coincidentally, they're not as good in this competitive play, you know. And I think if we went back and did it again, we probably would have paid much more attention to the competitive scene when we were designing those sets, but it didn't exist at the time, you know. So it was sort of you know, a confluence of a lot of things, making sure that, you know, those characters aren't quite as up to snuff as I think some of the other characters are. But that being said, you know, we have this like power cap, where not necessarily a power cap, but like sort of a ceiling that we can look to now competitively and say like, oh, you know, we don't want people to have more cancels than Bigfoot. We don't want people to have more mobility and card draw, you know, and ripping hands apart than Medusa. We don't want people to deal more direct damage than Sherlock. You know, and we have a lot of those sort of ideas where people talk about, you know, this is the area where these characters are really strong. And we can sort of set those as sort of soft limits that, you know, we can test. But if playtesting data comes back and, you know, we see that like, you know, Luke Cage or Ghost Rider wins 85% of the time, we can go back and we can say, okay, here's why, right? Because these are the things that the community thinks is really strong. and we've leaned a little bit too hard into those
Awesome.
things.
Well, thanks for the honest answer there, Brian.
Yeah.
One thing we like to ask everyone, and I should have asked you at the top, but I was just so excited to have you here, is what is your Unmatched origin story? How did you first get involved with the game?
Sure. So I started working at Restoration not on Unmatched at all. I originally started working at Restoration because Return to Dark Tower was in progress, and it was this big, huge project that had a bunch of stuff. And at that time, the design team was like just Justin and Rob, and another designer who designed Gloomhaven, Isaac Childress, was working on this project. But it ended up becoming so big and so crazy that they needed new people to come on. And so me and Noah came on at almost the exact same time, and we'd worked together on some other stuff. And we were like, hey, Return to Dark Tower was our life for 6 months. And this was in early 2019 that this was happening. Late 2018, early 2019. And so it was like right around when Cobble and Fog was getting finished up. And Cobble and Fog was for the most part designed by Chris Leader and Kevin Rogers, who are freelance designers and did an amazing job with that set. And so we were sort of working on Return to Dark Tower while they were working on Cobble and Fog. And then, all of a sudden I just sort of got a DM from Justin that was like, oh, you played a bunch of Magic with us during the last thing. Do you also want to work on this card game?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, of course I do. Like, I love card games. What is it? And, so I got a crash course in Unmatched at that time. And I sat down and I played a bunch of games, and I was like, man, this game's really cool. And so I did a little bit of development work on Cobble and Fog, and then it sort of spun off into me working on Little Red Riding Hood versus Beowulf. And Justin was like, hey, we sort of have a high level concept for these characters. Do you think you could design their decks and do all this other stuff? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I sat down and I designed Little Red first, and designed Beowulf shortly thereafter, which, a lot of people point out that sort of is a jump in complexity from the rest of the sets. And I think that's largely because, I jumped in and I didn't have a really good handle on what was too complex and what wasn't complex enough, yet. And so like that was sort of where I got started doing the Unmatched thing, was like going in and, working on Little Red and working on Beowulf and sort of fine tuning these characters. And I ended up calling Noah in, and I was like, hey, I have no idea what to do for Beowulf. What do you think Beowulf should do? And he was like, oh no, big angry barbarian. You got it. And I was like, oh, yeah, perfect. Exactly that. And so that's where the rage tokens came from and all of that sort of stuff. And then Justin has a way of sort of coming in and saying like, oh, all of these card names are super cool. I've read, I have 400 different copies of the Grimm Fairy Tales in my house, so I know exactly what all these Little Red card names need to be. So, we all have our roles, and I like to think of myself as sort of the person who goes in and sort of takes all of the experiences that we want and sort of puts them into a box. And I do that with all the products, not just Unmatched. And it's really interesting to work with people, Justin, Noah, and Rob, who are all incredible designers, and, being able to say like, let's sort of fit all of these experiences into this box, with card effects and card names and things that people can understand. So it's nice to be able to sort of have those conversations. And again, that's why Little Red is absolutely my favorite character, is because she was
yeah, that's like your baby
on Unmatched.
Yeah. Awesome. Mike, do you have any questions for Brian before I let him plug everything he needs to?
Well, no, not necessarily. When looking at kind of what you brought up, maybe is complexity of fighters. I think you said it yourself. Do you think in the future we'll have some more complex fighters like that again, or is that like hey, we did this, we don't know if it was perceived well enough, maybe we shouldn't do this? I don't know what you're allowed to diverse upon that, but
yeah, I can talk about some of that stuff. Like I think our sort of first big question that we ask whenever we are designing a box is, we always have to ask like, who is this box for? Battle of Legends Volume 2 is a really good example, because Volume 2 it has 2 in the name, so most of the people who are going to pick it up have probably already played Unmatched before. So like that box, the complexity in it is a little bit higher. It has bonus attacks, and it has, like some of the more complex schemes and abilities and things like that. When we go back and we look at Marvel, the Marvel characters are certainly less complex than Battle of Legends Volume 2. It has an IP. We're expecting it to reach a little bit of a wider audience and things like that. So those characters, we had to figure out how to get the power level that we wanted in much, much fewer words and much simpler concepts, right? And so, you saw things like the Daredevil spoiler, which is like Daredevil's thing is he gets a low hand count and he could blind boost off of his deck, and that's sort of a cool thing that he gets to do. Moon Knight, we got to do a cool thing because we got to just like put a bunch of different effects on his cards, or a bunch of different effects on his identities, but his cards are all relatively simple. So the actions that you're doing with him are relatively simple, and he sort of rotates through these 3 identities. And so we got to do a lot of cool stuff with the Marvel license because those characters are so rich. But it was also a design challenge because we had to make sure that someone who, picks up the Redemption Row is the first box that they pick up, that they don't go, man, this game is way too complicated for me. So I think that the thing that you'll see is that those characters are probably are lower in complexity level than Little Red and Beowulf in Battle of Legends Volume 2, probably higher than Volume 1. But the first and most important thing with those boxes is that the characters feel like those characters.
Theme
right?
above all else. Right.
Right, exactly. And John, I know that you're a big sort of Moon Knight fan. So I'm really hoping that I am too. I'm really hoping that we sort of hit that right on. And we started working on this before we knew when the Moon Knight series was going to come out. So it's just super lucky that we're releasing like so close to it, and that so many people get to discover this character in 2 different ways.
Yeah, I mean, your timing, all these
it.
delays that happened, I actually feel like the timing worked out in your favor because now all the Netflix shows that have Daredevil and Luke Cage, they're popping back up on Disney Plus mid-March. They're like part of the zeitgeist discussion again, and Moon Knight's coming out at the end of the month. So I think this worked out for you. And I mean, for me as the huge Moon Knight fan, I'm eating well this month.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
I mean, favorite board game gets your character.
Yeah.
TV show about to drop.
Yeah, it's a good time to be me.
Thematically, I don't think there's anything anybody can say they're disappointed in you. Like I say, you've always knocked everything out of the park from any set. I mean, even the Buffy set, people say it's so low powered, but when watching the show and then realizing, what the cards are and everything that they're in, I mean, it is so perfect. I mean, I had one friend who didn't quite finish the Buffy series, and they were like, why does Willow have a resurrection card? And I was like, oh, well, you'll find out.
Spoilies. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, Mike and I are really excited for these Marvel sets. By the time this drops, we'll have already ordered our boxes. We're really stoked.
Yeah.
And everything I've seen of Moon Knight, like that image that you guys released last week, it just looks great. Like, as the resident Moon Knight guy, I just got to say, you guys knocked this out of the park. It just looks so cool. Well, I appreciate it. So, Brian, thanks so much for being here. I know you've got some stuff you want to say. So what's on your mind?
Yeah, so I really appreciate y'all bringing up the Marvel set and talking about pre-orders. Pre-orders should be open by the time this episode comes out. So if you want to go directly to our store, which is restorationgames.com/shop, you can pre-order all of the Marvel set, or you can pre-order the first 2 Marvel sets there. Later on in April, we should have pre-orders up for the Jurassic Park set. So, if you really want those sets, we really appreciate it if you go to the website and get them direct from us. It's also the quickest way to get it, as we will send out your orders before they go into retail stores. We really appreciate the support, y'all. Y'all been doing a really, really great job. Both with this podcast and in the community in general, just sort of keeping things upbeat, keeping things real happy, keeping things positive. We appreciate it. And so, as far as restorationgames.com/shop goes, you can also find all of the other Unmatched sets there. We should be getting the first Jurassic Park set in again soon, as well as Battle of Legends Volume 2, Battle of Legends Volume 1, and all of the other stuff. So if you are looking to scratch an unmatched itch,
Cool.
that's the place to go.
Soon.
I might have heard
Soon.
something in that Discord that if we purchased the Marvel sets on the shop, we may be getting something if we ordered in time. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So if you go in and you have a pre-order during our pre-order window, you will get a never-before-seen
That's
promo
awesome.
code
I'm
before.
excited about that. And when is that order window? When should we expect to have that order window be? What do you think?
Our pre-order windows are staying open from the 7th until sometime around the end of March.
There you go.
So that's when the pre-order window is going to be open for, and then it'll ship sort of shortly after that. So
Cool.
be on the
Heard it
lookout
from
for
him
that.
first. Where to get it, how to get it, and you get something special. I think it's a tough bargain to beat, everyone. I really do.
Man, thank you so much for coming on, Brian. We really appreciate it. This is a really awesome thing for us.
Well, thank you all again for doing this and for keeping the community upbeat and positive.
Yeah.
We really
Thank you
appreciate
again.
it.
Wow, what an interview. Mike and I really want to thank Brian for coming on to the podcast and talking to us. That's just, what great support from Restoration Games, from their team. We've been so grateful and so thankful for everything they've done. And man, Mike, we got some really good interviews this episode so far, huh?
Yeah, not only did great restoration help from Brian come through, we had good old Prospero on, as is tradition, for him to bring some great insight on Muldoon and Bigfoot, as well as our friend Pommedepin. If I do say so myself, John, I think that the big three are somewhat to be absolutely terrifying, if you will.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's anything really that could beat them.
Yeah.
Whoa, guys. How can you make a podcast episode about the big three without talking about the big one?
Oh,
and we all know who that is.
Hold
Is that?
Is that Zero Skater 12? What?
That's right, guys. It's me.
What?
Is it not enough for him to beat me on his stream that he has to come on my podcast and degrade my content?
What is going on right now? Hold on, Zero Skater 12. John, what are you doing here? What?
Well, I had to come on and check out the podcast. I know you guys have started this thing up, and I fully support it. It's awesome. But you got this whole episode about the big three, and you're just going to leave it at that? You're not even going to talk about Yanenga at all?
Yanenga? Oh, John, is this your big one thing?
You better believe it. Yanenga is the new big one.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, you're here. We're excited to have you, I suppose. Everybody definitely wants to hear what you have to say. So what's up? What's the big one? What's going on with Yanenga? Tell me all about her.
Well, she's just the best. What more do I need to say? But okay, I guess I'll start with the story of Yanenga. Back in at Gen Con last year, I myself am against spoilers, so I had just found out and seen the new decks at Gen Con. And I saw Yanenga, and I was like, holy cow, this fighter is just ridiculous. Like, she has everything. I counted up her health total. It, theoretically equals up to, 35. And I was like, oh, my God, this thing's insane. So we tried out a game, me and Mike, actually, and it was my Jekyll versus his Yanenga. And I got absolutely destroyed. It was soul-crushing, to say the least. I just felt like I had no hope. She had so much health, and I just couldn't do anything at all, and it was devastating. And then the whole rest of the weekend at Gen Con, we were just sitting there talking about all the different matchups, and we were like, how does she lose? Who does she even lose to? Can anybody do anything? And I even told Justin that weekend, I was like, yeah, Yanenga's the best fighter in the game. I'm calling it right now. So time goes on, and I start playing more and more Battle of Legends Volume 2. And I kind of was thinking maybe I overreacted. Maybe Yanenga's not that bad. She's good, but is she really that good? I started to not think so. But then for the Winter of Champions tournament that's going on, I started playing her a lot more in preparation just because I had a lot of fun playing her. And the more and more I played her, I started to realize, maybe I was right back at Gen Con. Maybe she is that good because she really has very few losing matchups, and even the ones she does lose, she still has a shot to win. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Hey, John, what do you think? And by John, I mean our own host, Tommy Elliott. How do you feel about Yananga going on, especially with the Winter of Champions tournament?
Well, I guess I want to ask you some questions then, Zero, because Yanenga is the most played fighter this tournament, 81 plays. That puts her 21 plays ahead of Medusa at number 2, which is a pretty big gap. So obviously there's something to what you're saying. People are clearly thinking what you're thinking, but her win rate is only 53%. It's below what the big 3 are putting out. So
Yeah,
what do you make of
so
that?
well, it is really interesting to see that many plays. I mean, obviously that just shows the hype surrounding Yananga, and I guess like you said, people are buying into the theory. But she is a bit difficult to play. She's not super one-dimensional like some other fighters, like let's say Bigfoot. She takes a lot of matchup knowledge in each particular matchup of how to position your archers and when to use certain cards. And so the thing with her deck is it's so incredibly consistent. Every card is pretty dang good, but there's no cards like Beast Form or Forever Hide or Do My Bidding or those big bomb cards that really the deck revolves around. Everything is kind of spread out in terms of power level. So it's hard to tell when to use these cards most effectively, and um, it really is. She's very skill based, and so if you go in thinking, okay, Yanenga's just, I've heard she's the best, she's going to beat everybody, but you don't actually know how to play a particular matchup, you can definitely get punished. Because my thought on Yanenga is that she might have maybe an average about 50 to 60% win rate in pretty much every matchup. Maybe a couple matchups where she's sub 50, but very few. And so, when the matchup isn't that heavily favored towards Yanenga, it can go either way. And you really just have to rely on your skill and your experience in that particular matchup in order to get the win. But as long as you've practiced those matchups and you have that experience, you can just feel safe picking Yanenga into, blindly into pretty much anybody.
So you're saying big one. Does that mean that you can take her into any matchup with the big 3, Sherlock, Bigfoot, or Medusa? Can she beat them?
Yeah, so that's the moment that I really started to solidify my theory from Gen Con when I started prepping for Winter of Champions and I brought her into all of the big 3 matchups because I really wanted to stress test that and see how she would do into them. And I honestly just found myself winning like almost every game in all of the big 3, Medusa, Sherlock, Bigfoot, all of them. And I was like, oh my gosh, like she's just destroying these characters that we previously had thought were by far, the top of the tier list. And so I was just really surprised by that. And then I obviously played other matchups like, for example, Sinbad is one of her worst matchups, and Sinbad's a good character, but he was never in the talk of the big 3. And Bruce Lee, even, Bruce Lee was kind of low on the tier list, but he does really well in Tianenga, and so does Bloody Mary. And so there's a lot of quote lower tier fighters that actually do really well into her. But when she goes up against the previous big 3, she just kind of destroys them, honestly.
I love that you keep saying the previous big 3. Like you are set on it's the big one now. This is the new meta. The meta shifted this way. Do you think that that's going to catch on, or do you think that this is a character that is too skill based, too knowledge based?
That's a good question. It's really hard to say at this point. I think if people enjoy playing Yanenga and put in the time to practice, then she will definitely remain, very relevant in the meta. Um, Her weakness, like I had mentioned, is that she can be counterpicked a little more heavily than the big 3 can. Um, the big 3 have a lot uh, bigger margins in their win rates. Like in their winning matchups, they usually win by a lot, right? And whereas Yanenga wins by a little bit, but winning a matchup percentage by a little bit is enough as long as you have the skill to, execute that optimally. So it's hard to say. I think it's not quite as much of a, I would say, a fad as Muldoon was. I think there's a little more staying power in Yanenga here, but she could definitely fall, especially in the future with new fighters being released because she doesn't have feints, and that is a big weakness potentially. So we're gonna have to see how the new fighters, play out with the new Marvel stuff and all that.
Cool. Mike, do you have anything to add to this guy who just kind of hijacked our segment here?
Yeah, do you think maybe that Yananga, even though she's big one, do you worry about the Sinbad counter pick? Do you worry about the Bloody Mary? I mean, we kind of went over it real quick that they do pretty well into her. Would you say for people to worry about that if they try to pick her in the tournament per se? For instance, I don't think I've ever seen you first pick Yananga in your 3 rounds. I think you've always first picked Sherlock or somebody strong on that sense, and then you pick your way into Yananga. Is that because you're worried about the double counter? Um, well, what makes you think that she's not still first pickable, even though she could be, as you said it yourself, and I do agree, the big one?
That's a great question. Yeah, there's a reason why I don't first pick her because of exactly what you said. So if you first pick Yananga, you leave yourself open to getting triple counterpicked. Some like a lineup like let's say Sinbad, Bloody Mary, Bruce Lee. And Yanaga's gonna have to win one of those matchups. And although she definitely can, like I said, she can win into any matchup, even her losing ones, but you don't want to put yourself in that situation, right? You want to have the best shot at winning each game. So no reason to first pick Yananga and open yourself up to that situation when you can just pick one of the previous big 3 to probably draw out a ban and then have your Yananga for the rest of the fighters. And by that time, they've already passed their opportunity most likely to full counter Yananga, because if I'm confident that Yananga can beat any of the big 3, their first pick is usually a big 3 member. So then if they end up picking Sinbad, I can just ban Sinbad. And I've done that before in the tourney. I think that's the way to go, because as long as you're confident with your Yananga into the big 3, she can do it. So I know there's a stigma about, oh my gosh, it's the big 3. I have to ban them. It's an auto ban. And that's not actually always the right thing to do, because if you have a fighter that can beat them, why not take away and ban the fighter that Yananga really has trouble with, being a Sinbad or Bloody Mary. So yeah, I would definitely be ready to ban, odd picks like that and leave the big 3 open.
I couldn't agree more, especially with the new matchup this tournament looking like Yananga and Medusa compared to the Bigfoot Muldoon, as we keep bringing up. I think we're onto something there. I think she is somebody who can be kind of detrimental in who you ban from here on. The great thing about this game is how the meta always shifts when new sets come out. I think we'll see that again when Marvel comes out, one way or the other. What do you think, Tommy?
Well, Zero, I really want to appreciate you for coming on and spilling all of your strategy with 4 weeks left in this tournament. So I think that could be interesting. But our listeners definitely appreciate it. We really like hearing the side about the Yananga, especially because everybody who listens, plays this game, and a lot of people are in the tournament, and they're picking her, right? She's the number 1 pick. So I think it's really valuable for everybody to hear your thoughts on that, as clearly people are smelling what you're stepping in. People are going with this pick, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you champion her so much, and the community does tend to follow your lead on things because they trust you. You're a smart player. So thanks for coming on and talking. It was a nice
Yeah, my
surprise.
pleasure. Yeah, definitely. I love being on the show. I'm super excited for everything you guys are doing. I can't wait for more. And I'm always happy to, spill the beans, so to speak. I want to, raise the level of all the players in the competitive community, not just, remain on the top. But I'd rather bring everybody else up. So always happy to help teach and, help people learn and get better at this game.
You love to see it. I'm sure this won't be the last time you're with us.
I would love to be back. So anytime, just let me know.
Excited to have you back.
Yeah. Next time we can schedule it. You don't have to just pop in unannounced. But
Okay, sounds good. I'll try not to interrupt anymore.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon, Sarah. Thanks for stopping by.
All right, thanks guys. Take care.
Well, with that surprise appearance by John there out of the way, I suppose that's all, folks. Just to wrap up here, just going to reiterate what Brian threw out there. You can buy the new Marvel sets on Restoration Games website. Redemption Row is available to ship now. So if you order that right now, it will ship within 48 hours, I believe is what Justin has said in the Discord. And if you're ordering it, you're going to get an Achilles heel foil card, which is pretty snazzy. Hell's Kitchen is also up for order. It is a pre-order, though. It's looking like by the time you hear this episode, it should be shipping within a week and a half to 2 weeks from air date of the episode. Just talking about our guests and how thankful we were to have them on the show. Thanks again to Pommedepin for hopping on. Nothing to plug there, but for our other two guests, we've got some links for you. Prospero, he streams his matches on Prospero Sparks. That's PROSPEROSPARKS. I'm going to say that again because I coughed. It's PROSPEROSPARKS. That's his Twitch channel. He does stream a lot of his tournament matches through that. Those are always an exciting watch. So go give him a follow, watch his games. He just had a really exciting one with Bug this past week.
Amazing.
Yeah, he kind of talked about that in the interview, and it's just a good time. And then John, who surprised us with his appearance talking about Yanenga. You can follow him on Twitch and also on YouTube. So he'll stream his matches on Twitch at ZeroSkater12. That's ZeroSkatr, no E, 1-2. So ZeroSkatr 1-2. And then he edits those videos down into a more casual, relaxed, like sit down and watch in one sitting event on his YouTube. He also has other unmatched videos on his YouTube, some strategy guides, some playtesting guild stuff, just like a lot of really great Premier unmatched content. So if you're not already following John on Twitch and YouTube, you really should be.
Absolutely. We want to thank everybody for listening, and to get into some nice little quick end segment here, we've had a lot of questions regarding our scheduling for our episodes, both in personal messages, and also I saw it once in the discussion. Here's I think our answer that we both agreed upon. Look for at least 2 episodes a month from us. I think we can put that out, and I think I can safely say that. We're going to try to do a bi-weekly schedule. That's not us trying to say we're every Monday or every other Tuesday. It's more so, I've mentioned this a couple times. I'm very open about it. My schedule at work is kind of rough sometimes. It has nothing to do with the fact that I've gone to Vegas 2 weeks in a row. It's all about work.
Right.
So that being said, I think we have a lot lined up. I don't think it's a question. We've had people reach out to us about what they want to talk about. They would love to come on, and we would love to have everybody. John, what else you got?
Yeah, I mean, on that note about reaching out to us about topics you'd love to see, I mean, if you've got an episode hook in mind, if you've got something that you passionately want to hear about, maybe something you passionately want to speak about, or you've got a question for Mike, myself, or any of our esteemed guests, you can shoot us an email at defenderresolvesfirst@gmail.com. That's right, folks. The podcast is an email, so
we're getting official, folks.
We're just doing big things. So again, that's Defender Resolves First, the podcast title at gmail.com. Just email us whatever you want. You got some questions, you got some thoughts. We're also on the Discord. You can DM us whenever you want. I thought the email might be a little more organized, and it's just an easier way to see what you guys want to see. But going off that, the next time you'll hear from us is the first of a series that will have no schedule because we're going to free flow it. But this was something that was actually asked for in the Discord. Hubris brought it up, and I thought it was like a really good idea. It's something Mike and I had talked about before, but we weren't sure how much interest there'd be. So emboldened by the discussion in the Discord, we'll be doing the very first Unmatched Book Club episode. So we'll be joined by Baked Goods. He and I have read Beowulf. We'll be talking about Beowulf. We'll be analyzing it, not just as an epic poem for literary discussion, but we're going to be looking at how Restoration Games adapted the poem into the deck. So we'll be looking through the deck, we'll be looking through some cards, and we're going to talk about where do these cards come from, what's the thematic link, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're pretty into it. I think it's going to be kind of cool, and so many of the characters are literary that we can really draw a lot from that well. And I know Mike will be excited for when we do the Jurassic Park.
I love it.
Yeah, so look forward to that. The very first one again with baked goods. That'll be our next episode, and we'll be talking about Beowulf.
Yep, and I think we're good there. So as always, folks, Defender resolves first.
You'll love to see it.